From the heartland of America and the gateway to the West, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm George Norrie, and welcome to this remarkable program we call Coast to Coast AM. In the latest use of DNA to investigate the story of humankind, scientists have decoded genetic material from an unidentified human ancestor that lived in Siberia and concluded it might be a new member of the human family tree. Now, the DNA doesn't match modern humans or Neanderthals, two species that lived in that area around the same time, 30 to 50,000 years ago. Instead, it suggests the Siberian species lineage split off from the branch leading to the moderns and Neanderthals a million years ago or so. The researchers calculated all this, and they said that doesn't seem to match the history of human ancestors previously known from fossils. It's a great story. Up next to react to this, and we'll talk more about the Starchild Skull, Lloyd Pye, on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. Lloyd Pye, author, researcher, lecturer. Lloyd Pye has more than 30 years of experience of writing and speaking about the origins of life, human origins, hominoids, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, and others, and also the work of Zecharia Sitchin. Lloyd is also the caretaker of the famous Starchild Skull, and believes it could make history as big as history can be made. We'll have some updates on that tonight for you as well. Here's Lloyd Pye. Lloyd, welcome back. How are you?
I'm good, George. Thanks for inviting me back. Always a pleasure to be here.
Do we have a new ancestor out there from the cold, frigid spots of Siberia?
Well, you know, they never look at the other obvious option, in my opinion, which is that it's just a hominoid. It belongs to the Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or the Almas kind. Almas are dominant in Russia, and it could easily be one of those. But of course, as you know, mainstream science isn't going to allow that possibility into the equation. But you would expect a hominoid to be substantially different from a human, not so much different from a Neanderthal, but the fact of the matter is that whatever this thing is, it is significantly different from both of those. So to me, a hominoid is the logical creature to look at, but again, mainstream science is not going to do that anytime soon.
How big is the story, Lloyd?
It's big. It's big. It's very big because it's as big as The Hobbit was. Let's put it that way. The problem they have with it is that they have only the sample of can you imagine a fingertip of a little finger?
Yeah.
I mean, how'd they pick that out? What made anybody look at that and say, well, let's check this out? But, whereas The Hobbit, they have nearly whole skeletons. So it's not exactly on the same scale, but in terms of meaning, in terms of putting humans in a different perspective and allowing or forcing science to look at humans in a completely different way. We're already now looking at 4 possible different what they call hominin types or pre-human types, because if it was out there and walked on 2 legs, it was ipso facto pre-human as far as they're concerned, whether it was actually hominoid or not. But it certainly has opened the door. I mean, the hobbits were a huge hurdle for them to clear in their minds that
right.
such a thing could be. And now this is like, oh, well, we had the hobbits and now we've got another one. It's like this, they're just shrugging this one off as another possibility. Whereas I'm utterly convinced that the hobbits are nothing more than the little Siddhapa, Agagwi, small hominoid that stories have been going around for hundreds of years, and they go right now on the very same island. You go there and you talk to the people of Flores, and they say, oh, there's a little hairy creature that lives in the jungles and always has been, and that's what the hobbit is. But again, mainstream science is not going to allow that into the equation.
The use of DNA is incredible now in terms of making further discoveries, isn't it?
Fantastic. It's the best thing there is. All the TV shows, that use it as at their core. But what the listeners need to understand about DNA, what makes it so powerful, so incontrovertible, is it is math turned into biology. It is exact as math every time, and all you have to do is repeat it. It's repeatable in the same way that 2 plus 2 equals 4 every time you do it. The opposite sides of a right triangle, the angles are equal to 180 degrees. All of that, it's always the same. Same thing with DNA. It is math in biology, which is, it's a rare thing. So you just can't, it's hard to argue with it. I mean, it's really, really hard to argue with it when they have repeated the samplings enough times. You just can't argue.
No, not at all. Now, why do I think you have something new and remarkable to tell us about the Starchild Skull?
Well, because we have been doing, speaking of DNA, we've been doing DNA testing on, finally, after, since 2003, we've been trying to find somebody who would help us with another round of testing with the new technology that was available. We didn't find a geneticist who had access to that because it's just so expensive still, $200,000. But he did have access to new techniques dealing with primers, with human-only primers. There's a new technique called shotgunning. In 2003, we didn't have that advantage. We used human-only primers that were hundreds and low thousands of base pairs long, and that's all there were. It was just you use the base pairs, you put the base pairs into the solution, and they either hooked up or they didn't. At that time in 2003, we knew from the mitochondrial DNA recovery that the Starchild's mother was human, but when in 6 attempts, we couldn't get a nuclear DNA, which is from the mother and the father. When we couldn't get a recovery there, we knew the father was not human, if it was human, we would have gotten a recovery. But mainstream science has an answer for a situation like that. They don't say, well, yeah, wow, that's really cool. You've got what looks like a non-human father here. They just said, well, you just didn't get a recovery. That there must be something wrong with the DNA. It's degraded or just something, we all knew that wasn't the case. We needed better technique, and we have it now. And so the new geneticist applied those new techniques, and lo and behold, in the first run that he made, George, the first run, he found several examples of the Starchilds, but much smaller now, in the hundreds, in the low hundreds, 200 and 300 strings, base pairs long. But he found them, and they're there, and he found several which showed that the Starchild's nuclear DNA was part human, but also not just different from human, the way this new find was, but not found on planet Earth at all.
Wow.
Nowhere in the database of genomes of over 100 species of plant and animal that are logged into the database at the National Institute of Health. And none of that could he find corollaries to what he found. And he found several strings like that. So right away, right now, with just that little bit first sample, we know what we have.
You're making progress here, aren't you?
Oh, tremendous, through the roof, over the moon. I mean, literally. So just like in 2003, when we knew what we had but we couldn't prove it, the difference here is we know what we have and we can prove it. So that's the beauty of this. So what he has to do now is he has to repeat those samplings just the way he did it the first time, 2 or 3 more times, as long as it takes us to get the money that we need now to do that testing on the 454 machine, the big gun, and get the whole thing sequenced and really start into it in earnest. So that's what he's doing. He's doing another sequencing run just like he did the first time, and he's going to find the same thing. There will be sequences that are human-based, and there will be sequences that are not found on Earth. And as he mounts those up, critics get quieter and quieter. Now, you and I both know when he makes a formal announcement like those guys did today, this was just a letter in Nature. This is a very informal way to go about presenting this kind of information in the world of science. To do it formally, you have to do a peer-reviewed paper that appears in one of the big journals. It's a big deal. we're some distance away from that, but we're not too many weeks or maybe just a couple months, or we don't know exactly.